Hey everybody, it's the Bullshit Buddies. The intro is actually "It's your boys, the Bullshit Buddies."
When did that happen?
I don't know, it's all over YouTube now. It's your boys, the Bullshit Buddies. Sorry for the probably can tell the degraded audio quality. Unfortunately, as we were setting up today in lovely, lovely Toronto, I broke my microphone. So,
Well, it was your own goddamn fault, really.
yeah, Chad, stop with the victim blaming, which oddly enough is our topic today. Is victim blaming.
that inspired us to talk about victim blaming.
Oh look, it's Justin Trudeau.
Oh shit!
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
I think I see those famous
look, wait.
Muslim supporting socks that he
Yeah.
wears.
Yeah. Oh, that's what that's what a feminist looks like. He's showing us his penis. All right.
I don't think most male feminists are also exhibitionists.
Well, I was like, he was not happy. Well, Justin Trudeau knows who we are, and so he didn't. Yeah.
We had a personal falling out.
Have you watched any of his like videos talking in?
God damn it, dude! We're like 30 seconds in, and you're already
But have you?
derailing the fuck out of the conversation. Yes,
it.
I have. It's hilarious. But anyways, so we decided we wanted to talk about victim blaming. This seems to most often come up in the context of rape, where people want to point to things like, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? How much had you had to drink? Who were you with? Did you plan out your night? Things like that, and people kind of immediately get this hair trigger response of, stop blaming the victim. Victims are blameless, and I feel like there's a bit more nuance to this than that, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. But I feel like people need to take some responsibility for their actions to protect themselves against shitty people who are out there. They don't live in some kind of utopian fantasy land where nothing bad happens to anyone ever. Everyone's aware that there's some shitty people out there.
Oh.
And you kind of got to take some steps to prevent yourself. And I also feel like before we get too far into this, we should qualify that if you are the victim of a crime, you are a victim. Part of the reason why we call it victim blaming, but you are a victim. You didn't commit the crime against yourself per se. And the people who committed the crime against you, which in this case, dropping your mic was your own goddamn fault. So you were not necessarily a victim so much as an idiot. But
wait, no, you're getting the hardcore victim blaming now. Good lord.
But those people are criminals, and if we should take whatever steps possible to catch them, to properly prosecute them. So it's not, the point of this is not to try to absolve the criminals of their responsibility in this. We're specifically looking at the victim's responsibility in acting in the dark and dangerous world that we all live in. So, any thoughts there, Jeffrey?
Yeah, no, it pretty much summed it up pretty well. There's very few, I guess, crimes that are committed where there isn't some fault on both. I don't know about fault, but take this for example. Let's say you're walking down middle of Chicago, and you are taking your wallet out to count your money, and then you get robbed. Well, it would be reasonable to say that if you didn't do that, you would not have gotten robbed. You're flashing your cash. But the people who boarded three planes, the separate people who boarded three separate planes on September 11th, 2001, there was nothing they could have known or done to prevent that. There's not many. What the fuck am I trying to say?
Well, there's reasonable expectations, kind of depending on the crime, and to kind of build on your point about somebody stealing something from you.
Right.
Let's say you're sitting at home one evening in your neighborhood, your door's locked, and you're watching some TV. And four armed, masked men kick down your door, hit you with the butt of the rifle, and start, beating the crap out of you while rummaging through your house and stealing all your shit.
Right.
When you relay that story to me or to anyone else, I don't really feel like anyone's going to be like, well, what show were you watching? Like, What kind of door locks did you have set up there? Yeah, we don't look at situations like that and start blaming the victim, because there was nothing that you reasonably could have done to prevent that from happening, right? But with your analogy, yeah, I mean, okay, let's say you go out to a bar alone in a shady part of town, you get fall down fucking drunk, and you decide to walk 5 miles home through the ghetto while waving wads of cash around. You tell me that story. My first response is going to be, damn, dude. Oh, sorry, and then you get robbed by those same 4 armored masked men. My first response is going to be, why the fuck did you do that, you goddamn idiot? So it really kind of depends on the situation. Now, you put that in a rape context.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There's really only one context where this ever applies.
That's one context where you ever hear it.
Yeah.
But you...
I mean, like, where you hear people say, don't blame the victim.
Right, but it actually does equally apply to pretty much every crime. In that, if you were doing something that stupid, I would blame you to some extent for it. Doesn't mean that you're not a victim. Doesn't mean that people who stole from you and assaulted you aren't criminals. But it means that you share more of the blame for the predicament that you found yourself in than you would have if you had just been sitting at home watching TV.
Right.
So then you put that in a rape context. A woman sitting at home watching TV, behind locked doors, 4 masked men kick down her door and gang rape her. She is a completely blameless victim in that situation. There's nothing that she could have reasonably done to prevent that. Now, that same girl goes out to that seedy part of town, gets fall down drunk.
Right.
In this case, I guess the equivalent would be she's not waving around wads of cash, but she's wearing a mini skirt and, I don't know, some low-cut blouse, and I don't know what the fuck, like, but she's doing something that also kind of exacerbates her as a target.
Right. After
putting herself in that situation, decides to walk those 5 miles through the ghetto, and those same 4 dudes, I don't know, these same 4 dudes are getting up to a lot in these hypotheticals, but then those same 4 dudes rape her, and I would be more sensitive to that situation, in part because I don't really care about your feelings as much as I care about this hypothetical girl's.
Right.
But I understand it could potentially be, actually it would be more traumatic and more lifelong. I mean, you have some bruises that'll heal, and you lost a couple $100 or whatever, but she's, I don't know, potentially impregnated, potentially STD, definitely traumatized in terms of sexual experience and all that. But I would still say, more gently, why the fuck were you doing that? Why did you put yourself in that situation?
Right. Yeah. No, there's an insidious argument here that let's get this out of the way, because basically victim blaming is like, I think it's perceived as kicking somebody when they're down. Really what it is trying to help them prevent, not all the time. I mean, sometimes people just want to kick somebody when they're down, but a lot of times I think it's like, well, maybe in the future you wouldn't do this and this won't happen. And
Good point.
And also it's a crime no matter what the circumstance. So it almost seems a little bit futile to even talk about victim blaming in that sense, because of course it is still a crime to do whatever that was done. The weird part about victim blaming is the double standard. So, and this comes right out as a man can't be sexually assaulted. If a man is sexually assaulted, he probably enjoyed it. It's like, that's ties into victim blaming. It's I think one of the worst parts of victim blaming is that clear double standard.
Yeah. Okay. So you raised a few good points. One, you just reiterated, of course, you are still a victim. And I think the really excellent point that you raised is the timing in which you present this is like, okay, let's say you got assaulted by those 4 guys, even if you did something real stupid that resulted in that happening, and you stumbled to my house bleeding, out of the, you got black eyes.
You're probably not going to choose that time to
smashed open, and you've got massive lacerations everywhere, maybe a stab wound or 2 thrown in the mix. My first reaction is, holy shit, dude, let's get you some medical help.
Yeah.
I'm not immediately going to go, well, what were you doing that led up to these circumstances?
I know a circumstance where that would happen. I was at a bar, and there was all these bikers, and I decided to play Barbie Girl on the jukebox. That really happened.
That was a real story. Yeah. So it turns out that if a bunch of bikers are in a bar and you decide to cue a Barbie Girl on the jukebox on a repeat like 4 times,
they don't appreciate irony.
They get really upset about that. Yeah.
The only thing that was going through my head was, what if one of these bikers
is secretly enjoying
sits there just bobbing his head, and it's like, come on.
I didn't think about that. Anyway, so timing is definitely important. You know, I mean, if anyone comes to you seeking solace as being the victim of a crime, condolences and medical help, whatever is required at the time should be offered first. But the conversation around, if you're in such a relationship with that kind of person that you feel like you can be offering advice, my advice to you with, Jeff, maybe you shouldn't be getting that shit-faced and you shouldn't be carrying around hundreds of dollars and waving it around in the ghetto. Would also apply to women. I don't know, man. It just seems like a lot of the stories that I hear about this kind of stuff, women were not taking those proper steps. I mean, you hear about, a girl just going solo after pre-gaming half a bottle of fucking Jack Daniels to herself to a frat party and then getting raped, and it's like, did she get raped?
Well,
yes, but like, what the fuck was going through your head leading up to that?
Here's the thing, though. I would like to. I mean, it's this. Like I said, this is where it applies, or this is where you hear it applied, I should say, the most. But I think just for the sake of being well versed in it, let's take it away from the sex crimes just for a second. What do you do when you're getting ready to go out at night and you're going to get drunk, so you either call a cab or you're going to walk home? What I do is I make sure I have something on me. I have a knife that if things get real, and I never have to use it, but I do take that precaution. I have something that is, or a mace, or anything, just to say.
Even the planning to take a cab or Uber or walk, is a form of advanced planning.
Right.
Because you understand, maybe you only intend to go out and have 2 drinks.
Right.
But one thing might lead to another, and you have more. So you're kind of taking some preventative steps before even going out. To ensure your own safety. Yeah,
I think, and obviously, rape seems to happen more to young women, and they go out for the night out in the town and it ends horribly. And we've all been young and incredibly stupid, where we thought, and where we thought we were going to go out for 2 hours, and we end up it's 6:30 in the morning, and we're trying to figure out how to get home. And in that context, it's like, well, that dude was truly a monster, but you're not blameless. You made a mistake, and it ended up really bad for you. But it doesn't make you a bad person or stupid. It just means you made a mistake. And
well, but here's the things beyond. I know you touched on this just a bit ago. Beyond trying to capture and prosecute and punish the individuals who commit crimes, we don't have any control over them.
Right.
You only have control over yourself.
Wait. We can teach men not to rape,
dude.
Because the men that rape care about right and wrong. Clearly.
Yeah, okay, this bothers the fuck out of me. And okay, so I will say I think the most valid argument that I've heard in favor of that is that some of the areas around what constitute consent are a little gray, right? And you could argue there's a culture of when a woman says no, it means to some extent maybe you just haven't sufficiently seduced her or whatever. So teaching guys not to be pushy in that regard, I can see some validity in that.
Well, it's even more confusing than that.
I can see.
Remember the Louis C.K. joke? Well, I said no, but I just want a guy that kind of takes it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, no, that's what I mean. But it is kind of gray, and I also to some extent reject that idea that just because a woman initially spurns your advances doesn't mean that she doesn't want you to try a little harder or impress her a little more or something like that.
But there's a fine line there too. There's a thick line.
Yeah, it's really it's tough. It's tough, and it's really difficult to read those kind of situations because people, not even just women, but people do play hard to get, and they want you to kind of show them something worth fighting for. I feel like a lot of times women appreciate a guy who goes to great lengths to win them over, and guys a lot of times appreciate a difficult conquest in that regard. Oh, yeah. So it's tough. And I feel like those conversations are worth having. But I mean, so when I went to college, of which I dropped out, it was actually required that all men, just men, not women, men take a class where they basically sat us down and it wasn't an open conversation around things like that. Right. Really nuanced, kind of weird situations that acknowledge how people actually engage in sexual behavior. It was more like, you need to, if a woman says anything that dissuades you from that, that's no. Don't rape people. rape is bad, guys. Fucking what else do they? Yeah, the constant obtaining of consent.
Yeah.
Too is like you can put your hand on her back if she specifically consents to that action, but you can't move that hand down to her butt unless she also specifically consents to that action. You can't kiss her unless she specifically consents to that action.
Yeah.
You can't put it in her without her specifically consenting to that action. Which I feel like you can read situations for the most part, except when it comes to anal. That's something that you should obtain pretty. A girl needs to say, "Stick it in my ass" before I'm gonna. I don't pop that on people.
No, you never should. You never should.
If the BS buddies want to convey one message today,
don't just pop
it's that you don't just pop it in.
Did you guys going around like the locker rooms of high school? Did you guys also call that the quarterback sneak?
No.
It was a horrible joke that I'm pretty sure nobody ever did. But the quarterback sneak is when you're doing it and then you just slip it in real quick and then say it was a mistake. It's a horrible joke, but
so actually, true story. That actually happened one time.
It happened to me too.
I was hooking up with a
I
girl.
almost broke my dick on that shit. Actually,
No, that's a thing, dude. I slipped it in and continued fucking, and then afterwards she was like, you really like should ask. And I was like, what?
You didn't tell the difference?
She had.
Would you have a condom on?
Yeah.
That's why.
I guess, but like,
like
dude, I've sat there having to like whittle away at that thing and pump it full of lube and get butt plugs and play and everything involved before I can even get like half the fucking tip in. And I was able to just be wailing away at that and didn't even notice. Like, I don't know, that girl had a very big old large asshole apparently.
Have you ever, this is the one that happened to me.
We were going to talk about victim blaming, but Jeff and I just want to tell you about
this is kind of funny though.
Weird sexual experiences.
When I was having sex with my ex-girlfriend, and we were going. She got a little too thrusty. Like, you know how sometimes you get a little too thrusty, but you're not totally timed up, so it ends up coming out.
And then she thrust down on it hard.
Yeah, and then instead of getting like, I mean, I either just have a huge dick, or I'm just incredibly unlucky. Because that 1.5 inches between the vag and the ass.
Yeah.
It speared right in that 1.5 inches, just that hard bone, and ended up bending it pretty bad, and it hurt quite horrifically.
Apparently, you can actually
you can
like break your dick doing that.
Do you ever crack it like a knuckle?
No,
you can. It's weird.
I'm not gonna try. Yeah. Anyway, so to try to get this conversation vaguely back on track.
This might be the best one we've ever done.
This is our masterpiece, folks.
Yeah.
What you're listening to right now. No, the idea of trying to teach criminals not to be criminals, if you're going to try to have that discussion, needs to be much more nuanced, much more individual, and not a lecture, but a conversation. You can't stand up in front of a group of predominantly men who would be the ones doing this, and just say, punching a guy in the face and taking his wallet is bad. Don't punch guys in the face and take their wallets. I mean, if you want to have a greater discussion about, criminals do usually feel somewhat justified in what they're doing. So you need to kind of get at, what are the underlying motivations? What's your background? I mean, things like that. That would actually be a useful discussion. Right. But just to stand up like they did at this college class that I had and just say, don't rape women. Raping women is bad.
Yeah.
You need to ask explicit permission before you ever kiss, just stuff like that.
Well, I remember Ricky Gervais making fun of this shit. Like 2007 when he was stand-up, where he was talking about the fucking the BBC or something had to add, just remember it's always wrong to rape, and he did this whole like thing where this guy is getting ready to go out into town and his mom asks him where he's going, and he's like takes off the ski mask. What, Mom? What? Like, what are you doing? Just out for a little raping. I shouldn't. I shouldn't.
Shit.
It's bad. But the other, I think the rape is one of the only crimes that can't be romanticized in any way. Like you could say a thief. Some of the greatest figures in literature, like fictional, were thieves. You know, they're stealing for their family, they're stealing for the poor.
Well, shit, dude, I got a minor boner through most of the heist scenes in all of the Ocean's movies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool, right?
Well, that might have just been Brad Pitt
Yeah,
accounting for the boner, honestly.
But murder, even there's an element of vigilantism. Like think about Taken, you know, where this guy.
Oh yeah, he just literally kills off like dozens of dudes from a sex trafficking ring.
But rape and child abuse, I would argue, are the two that you. And I mean, the reason why there's no victim blaming child abuse because of course a kid can't do literally anything.
All right.
You know, they can't do anything. They have no idea what's going on. But with rape, there's no romanticizing. Like this was a good person who just he needed to kill for his family. He needed to steal for his family. No, he needed to rape for what?
Right. Yeah. No. It's either a sick attempt at sexual pleasure or desire to control other people. And you're right. There's nothing that can be kind of romanticized about that. And yeah, in a way, that almost makes it even more useless just to tell people not to do it. Because it's
exactly.
Well, why? I mean,
because you can
just
talk
telling
a
them
thief.
that. Just telling them that. Saying like, you know, you just because a girl is wearing skimpy clothing doesn't mean that she's asking for it. True. I would agree with having that as part of the lecture. Just, you know, there's a certain level of intoxication. I don't agree that it's being intoxicated at all, but there's a certain point where, you know, if the girl's stumbling, fucking fall down drunk, or blackout, certainly, doesn't mean that that's a free pass at sex. Things like that. Some guys legit don't know that.
Right.
And it's worth having that conversation, but and actually some girls don't, for that matter.
Well, isn't it odd that this? He said sarcastically, that this whole thing came when, you know, men and male sexuality has been demonized for the past 6-7 years. You know, this, yeah. Like, because when you say teach men not to rape, what you're saying is all men intrinsically are vile, evil animals that want to rape, and that's not in any way, shape, or form true. We might have dominance fantasies, but those dominance fantasies aren't rape fantasies.
Well, did some men have fantasies of getting tied up and pegged in the ass with a dildo?
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. Everyone has their own kinks, but I feel like a better analogy for this, the kind of useless, condescending approach that these lectures take, could almost better be described as I've occasionally been in situations where I'm around groups of women who are basically treating me like I'm not there. They're just having their own girl talk.
Right, for sure.
Not necessarily treating me like one of the girls, more just ignoring. But dude, some of the vapid, selfish shit, you know, talking about, you know, just, well, you don't really like the guy, but, you know, he's got a lot of money, so I'm probably just going to use him to try to get some purses and, you know, and then nope the fuck out of there. Conversations of that nature are kind of like the girl equivalent of locker room talk, or maybe, you know, he's a shitty guy, but, you know, he gives really good dick, so I put up with it, or, you know, whatever.
Right.
I mean, I've heard a lot of stuff that is kind of appalling, and I chalk a lot of it up to that's just kind of girl version of like I said, guy locker room talk, and it doesn't necessarily convey an actual intent to behave that way necessarily. Sometimes it's just kind of how girls want to talk, but I wouldn't look at that conversation and then on that basis say that every girl, when she enters college, needs to be sat down in front of a lecture and told not to be a selfish, money-grubbing whore. You know, being a gold digger is wrong. You know, I mean, just stuff like that. It's like, because there's an existence of some shitty people who tend to exhibit certain shitty behaviors that are usually unique to either gender, doesn't mean that everyone of that gender needs to be subjected to that lecture.
Yeah.
And I will definitely say gold digging is not anywhere near the same league as rape. But
well, is it okay if I virtue signal real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Actually, no, it's not.
It's not really virtue signaling, but I just want to emphasize.
We don't have virtues on this podcast, Jeff.
Oh yeah, that's true. So what recently, like last week, one of my friends. So I'm friends with these two people, and one of them cheated on the other. The guy cheated on the girl, and I was on the phone with her until about 4 a.m. I was supposed to call another friend, and they were wondering why I never called them. And I said, I'm sorry, I've been on the phone, like, this is what happened. And she said, oh, men always cheat, those bastards. And I'm like, no, people cheat. Let's be a little more mature about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's an element of immaturity with all this, you know, like, I've been cheated on, you've been cheated on. Is that all women that would cheat on you? No.
Right.
Like, I've had plenty of wonderful girlfriends who it hasn't worked out for one reason or the other, who would never dream of cheating. No matter how bad the relationship was going, they said, no, I'm not going to do that. So for anybody to label, like for me to label, because it happened to me once or twice, all women are going to do this is just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and sitting them all down, all women,
Yeah.
every woman who goes to college, which I also feel like, and maybe this is biased, because I know that, like, frats, for example, exhibit higher amounts of rape than, like, average college students.
Right.
But I feel like most kids that get into college probably aren't the ones, like, dragging women into dark alleys and raping them. I almost feel like that's even, like, the more useless demographic to be targeting, like, college-age boys. It's like...
Well, I think what it
dude
is...
would be stoked to be getting a consensual, sober blowjob in the back of his shitty car or whatever, you know. But sitting all women down and saying if cheating is bad, or all men, cheating is bad, don't cheat.
Right.
I mean, again, a useful conversation around those things, sure. But just, I don't know, the lecture format was something that just kind of rubbed me really the wrong way. Like, they didn't even necessarily open it up for questions afterwards, after the lecture.
Well, let's talk about, like, because I think largely the victim blaming shtick came out of this Aubrey Potts thing that happened in California.
You'll have to refresh my memory.
She was a high school girl who went to a party. She passed out. I don't know if there was drugs or if it was just alcohol. I think it was just alcohol. But, you know, she was 17 or 16. She might have been younger. She passed out, and she was fingered by at least one guy.
Oh, I do remember this.
Yeah. Now, you look at that story and you go, okay, there was 5 men, young men involved in this, and, you know, if you want to say, like, rape is like, you know, just not all men do it, and then you look at some of these cases where there's like 5 or 10 people engaging in it, I really think, one, sometimes shitty people group up together.
Right.
And the other thing is the opportunity and the setting can bring out an inherent, not an inherent, but if you have the monster in you, it could bring that out.
Everyone does, actually. And, you know, we'd be remiss if we got their podcast without mentioning Jordan Peterson. But that's one of the things that I like the most about him is that he frequently addresses the issue of acknowledging your inner monster. Right?
Yeah.
And just his example that, like, you know, if you were a German living in, you know, 1930, 1940 Germany, you'd probably be a Nazi.
Right. Well, it kind of is sounding like we're contradicting ourselves, saying that not all men would do this.
But I'm saying everybody. No, my point is everybody has the capacity for shitty behavior, and your point was that being put in certain situations makes people more likely to engage in that. But my point is, like, that approach to that kind of discussion is a lot more useful.
Okay.
And actually, I mean, I think it ties back to you just mentioned you had some girlfriends who you said, quote unquote, would never dream of cheating on you. I think that's actually an unhealthy way to view any kind of potential for crime, because everyone has the potential to cheat on anyone. You could love somebody a whole bunch, but, you know, you get into a fight and you hang out with one of your girlfriends or guy friends, and you know, like, fuck that other person, and then you happen to get approached by a particularly hot chick at the bar while you've had 4 beers deep. I feel like it's better to acknowledge beforehand that you have potential to commit crimes, because if you don't acknowledge that, or just bad actions, so cheating is not a crime, but just bad actions, if you acknowledge that beforehand, you're more well equipped to deal with that
Right, yeah, you've already confronted it.
When it comes up, exactly, you've confronted it before it gets to the point where you're pissed at your significant other and you're a little drunk and there's some hot chick who's rubbing your arm at the bar or whatever the fuck it is. But again, that's not how this is kind of being posed. It's not being saying, you know, all men are rapists and all people have the potential to commit bad actions is not the same thing.
I see what you're saying.
That's my main gist here.
Yeah.
I get how we were running close to contradiction there.
It's, you know, look, put in any situation, I guess we're all capable of horrible shit, but the fact is that 99% of men get through their day and get through you think of a married guy who is tempted by he's in his 40s, and he's balding and he's fat and he's fucking like, he's got his wife and she doesn't love him anymore, or she loves him but she doesn't give it up anymore, and but they have kids together and they have, and yes, he's going to be tempted by that 19-year-old girl who wants this 40-year-old guy as a sexual conquest in her young years. But if he takes a moment and confronts the fact that, but I have so much more with this other person, just years and years, is this worth throwing it all away for? Probably not. So, you gotta confront it.
So that's one approach, obviously, is seeing what you have by not committing bad acts. But kind of the point more that I was getting to is him acknowledging that there's the potential in him to want to have that affair.
Oh yeah,
right. And I guess that's a part of.
Well, that was the temptation.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be tempting if there was no part that went.
But I just feel like burying that.
Yeah, it's not
burying that is not useful to not then committing that action and just saying I'd never do that. I'd never cheat on my wife. I never, and then I don't know, end up working late at the office one night and crack a bottle of whiskey. I'm picturing this as a very Mad Men. Situation.
Yeah. Well, that's a great thing though, because like that. I think most guys have that madman fantasy where you're the king of the office, and anything you want is yours, right? You could literally be one of the biggest pieces of shit in the office. But what was the guy's name?
What his real name?
No, his fake name, the one that he assumed.
I'm actually blanking, dude. It's been a long time.
Something like Strapper or something like that. Anyway, let's call him Manly McMusk.
Draper.
Oh, yeah, Draper.
Don Draper.
He's actually a really Manly McMusk.
He was. Yeah.
But aside from
he was like a real life Archer.
Yeah, kind of. But I only watched one season. But he had his flaws. He cheated on his wife a lot. He wasn't as particularly caring as he could have been to her. But when shit came down in the office, he was usually the good guy.
Right.
So it's a fantasy where you can have everything you want, but you choose to moderate yourself.
Right. But you can't do that unless you confront those things before.
Exactly. Right. Which he did by going to Korean War and having his two-man unit bombed out and assuming his identity. Maybe he was a piece of shit. I don't know. Anyway.
He was kind of a piece of shit, actually. He was definitely more of an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Kind of example, but those characters have always appealed to me.
Well, nobody's like Superman though, right? Whereas that's why Superman's boring. Yeah. Nothing can hurt you except this one.
I really dislike Superman. Like I say, I'm more. I gravitate more towards like the Batman type.
Like, really?
I said Batman type.
Okay.
Batman. The more recent.
You seem like a Ben Affleck Batman guy.
Do you need a lozenge? Jesus Christ! Like I'm not a big fan of that. But no, just the idea of somebody who has a darker side.
Yeah.
And has their weaknesses and has their fatal character flaws. I mean, fuck, like what Superman's got one kind of mineral, I guess,
right,
that can harm him, and everything else is impervious to, and just kind of is like this really pure little fucking thing dancing around. I love Lois. Like, I don't know.
Let's look at
and Batman's like, this guy's a bad guy, so I'm gonna shove him off of a fucking building and break his legs and.
But I mean,
stand of what he screams. Like I like that element where
because he had a dark past.
Justice.
There's something to be said for like. I think the best people you'll probably
justice.
The best people, your favorite people you'll probably meet in your life are the ones that have had past struggles and dark pasts, and they rose above it, because those are going to be the most empathetic and people who truly confronted their inner monster. Think of like Christopher Hitchens. This guy was a communist. He was a big communist activist. He realized then that, oh shit, communism is not a good thing, and then he was one of the most intelligent proponents of capitalism and meritocracy, while also calling everybody comrade, which was just charming.
Yeah. So we mentioned Peterson,
Christopher
Hitchens. Did we mention Joe Rogan yet?
No, Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
We're gonna mention
Joe Rogan.
Gadsad.
We don't mention Gadsad on every.
Yeah, that's true.
I think those are the big three. No, those are the big three. I seriously don't think we've gotten through like a single fucking podcast not mentioning at least one of those.
Can we add a new?
Yeah, sure.
Ari Shaffir.
Oh, that was fucking
Yeah, there's a second part to that.
I know. Jeff introduced me to that recently. Stand up, not the podcasting work that he's done. Fucking hilarious.
His podcast was pretty funny though. They did a.
I was familiar with that already.
Oh, okay. I mean, did you see the one where they went on boob watch?
No.
Okay, so this I don't want to anyway. Never mind.
All right, so to try to vaguely
having spent time on the East Coast, there is a thing called. Well, it's not called, but there is amongst young men on the East Coast, there is a thing called International Cleavage, or not it's Cleavage Day, not International Cleavage Day, Cleavage Day, where you just get out of the winter months and it's starting to get hot and women start wearing their low cuts.
It's basically California year round.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he did this thing in New York City where he was walking around with three guys, his two friends, him and two other people, and they had a microphone and they're just walking around New York City going, boobs. Boobs.
Sounds like a good use of a day.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, is there any way to salvage this conversation back to victim blaming?
I think we actually covered everything on victim blaming. We all have inherent monsters where you confront the monster, as Jordan Peterson said.
Right.
And then you're better equipped to deal with it. But even that being said, I think some men are just the vast majority of men are just in good. Okay. Let's do a little thought experiment. Because I am of the opinion that your average man, your 99% of men, are incapable of raping somebody. And so here's how we're going to do this. Let's look at the cold, hard, brutal reality of rape. You go out of your house, assuming, and you look for a woman to rape. And then, or you go on a date and you ended up date raping her. But the actual thing that happens is, she tells you not to, you hold her down, she's crying, you have to slap her around, you have to pull her pants off, rip, just get done what you want to get done while she is trying to push you off and hitting you, and you have to strangle and choke and hit her into submission. This is not a thing that if you presented to 99% of men would turn them on. That would turn them on in the slightest.
No. And I'm actually really glad that you circled back around to that before we wrapped, because I wanted to touch on this earlier. But since we're kind of looking at victim blaming in the context of rape, the lines around what constitutes a rape, I also feel like are super blurred.
Yeah, they're getting very blurred.
Because what you just described, obviously rape, right?
Right.
Unequivocally, no questions asked, for sure. But I feel like especially on college campuses, I mean, yeah, like the idea that if you haven't obtained express permission to do whatever it is that you're doing,
yeah.
I think I mentioned in a previous podcast that we did that, like at Berkeley, I literally saw they had cards available in all of the dorm hallways where you could write down, like, I, so-and-so, consent to this sort of sexual interaction with so-and-so, signed and dated here by both parties.
I actually think it's kind of cool that Berkeley did that. As worthless as that is, because she could say, well, I did it under duress. He was forcing me to sign it.
Right.
But isn't it
my signature?
Yeah, isn't that sad that could end up actually having to be a thing? What less romantic to it?
Exactly. It's kind of my point. Like, the only way I could see it even being kind of romantic would be if you're both doing that somewhat satirically.
Yeah, and it'd be a little funny.
And be like a little funny, just like, because you're gonna suck my dick.
But then you stick it in your back pocket. You're like, just in case.
Just in case. I'm actually holding on to this. Yeah. But no. It just seems like the lines on what constitutes rape are getting really blurred with what is just normal sexual interaction between human beings now.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've given frightening license to women, frightening from the point of view of a man, to basically just decide after the fact that they would rather not have that sexual interaction on their sexual manifesto, we'll call it. Because they don't feel like it reflected very well on them, or maybe they don't feel like. I mean, so. Well, there was having 2-3 beers, and feeling a little good about yourself, and you decide to sleep with someone that you don't. I mean, and guys do this all the time. Right? Yeah. There's the whole beer goggles thing where I mean, initially you want to shoot for the the 8 at the bar, but by the time you've had 6, you're willing to sleep with the 4.
I thought you were going to go with 2, and I was going to disagree. You never go 2.
No, I was going to say 3 and below. Like, it becomes pretty evident.
Yeah, 3 and below is just like, I'm just going to go home and jerk off.
Yeah. But But my point is, like, yeah, so, I mean, you might roll over the next morning and say, like, that probably isn't somebody that I would have fucked if I was entirely sober.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that they raped you.
Yeah.
Right? It means that you kind of willingly went out and you knew what alcohol did, and you impaired your judgment to the point where, things of that nature seem more permissible or more appealing. I don't know, man. I get that they have to, like, draw the line somewhere. Right? But it seems like they're erring almost, like, too much on the side of caution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it.
Just from the false rape conviction point of view.
This is kind of how I think about it. Is we live in a very, like, your first world, you live in a very clean society. You really don't have besides car crashes and your plane going down, you don't really have a lot to worry about on a daily basis. Sex is kind of one of the last primal carnal things that we engage in a real setting. Like, we kill people in video games, right? But it's not real. But sex is hopefully real. Hopefully real for you. And it's really the last carnal thing that we do. And why we expect it to always be clean and without regret. We do always expect it to be consensual. And that's where you go, yes, always consensual. But without regret?
No, if I could turn back the clocks and not stick my dick in some of the crazy chicks that I've stuck it in over the years, I might do it.
But it might not.
It might not.
You thought of that one.
Just really good. But my point is, you don't get to then kind of change your past actions and say, like, I willingly did this, but I regret it now. Therefore, it was rape. And there has even been some recent redefinitions on, like, how much did she enjoy it. Like she can actually just decide that the sex wasn't fulfilling enough. Right. Ergo, she didn't enjoy it. Ergo, if she didn't enjoy it, it was against her will because she wanted something that she was going to enjoy. Ergo, she was raped. Right. That's fucking frightening as a guy. Literally, my performance now. My performance is being judged. I'm like,
well, it's always being judged.
If she doesn't, but it used to just be if she didn't come, she just didn't call me back.
Yeah,
Now I'm a rapist. Like, well,
I've heard.
I agree that these kind of extreme definitions are mostly. This is why I mentioned college campuses are mostly being used on college campuses because they are allowed to kind of conduct their own little tribunal courts. At one point, I know I can see you're chomping at the bit, but I do want to point out the Department of Justice currently defines rape as penetration. Mm-hmm. So it has to be penetration of the vagina or anus. Yeah. That's a recent redefinition. Still, obviously, very, very slanted in favor of women being raped. 2013.
Yeah. I was going to say 12.
Prior to 2013, I forget the exact wording, but it was defined as something about carnal knowledge of a female or woman, and something. But basically, female was in the definition. If you weren't a female prior to 2007 or 2013, according to the Department of Justice, you could not have been raped.
Right.
The definitions seem really fuzzy kind of from every direction, but even up to the highest authorities that are tracking this kind of shit, it does seem very skewed in favor of women. And then you get to the point of a tribunal at a college where they can define things like, I've heard stuff as like 72 hours women are given to decide whether or not they were raped.
I've heard that.
You've heard that? Yeah. That's fucking nuts. If you got raped, you should be able to tell like pretty goddamn quick.
Right.
Like the morning, even if you were shit-faced drunk, the morning after should have been enough time.
Well,
for you to decide, like, well, was that? I mean, maybe the guy's a lot uglier than I'd normally sleep with, but was I raped? Do I need to think about this for 3 fucking days before I decide to ruin his? And they're being treated as pretty enforceable, at least within academia. It might not be enough to land the guy in prison, but it's enough to get him barred from the entire, state college system.
Well, I think you have to look down 10, 15 years in the future. I just think it's kind of funny that all these in favor of women laws are being made by a bunch of, as the feminists like to say, old white dudes who are regulating my body. It's like, wait. You can't have these old white dudes are clearly on your side. Okay, so, but anyway, I just think that's kind of, it's like having your cake and eating it too.
The regulation on reproductive rights.
Yeah,
I actually think it's pretty.
It's insane, and it needs.
That's
to
one
be
of the
stopped.
most.
But here's the thing.
I think that
Yeah.
is if modern day feminism and past feminism, for that matter, third wave, second wave, first wave, has one legitimate grievance, I think it's that.
Well, I
like,
think
rape culture is bullshit. Gender violence, bullshit. Pay differences, bullshit. But if like the one thing that I think that they really have a claim on is people shouldn't be telling women that they can't get abortions. They shouldn't be telling them they don't have access to birth control. Like, who the fuck wants women to be having kids that they aren't in a position to?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I also think the abortion, and guys, we're going to do, the next podcast we're doing is on prostitution. So we're going to put abortion in there too, I think. And we'll save this for the next podcast. I think abortion, though, the debate is where it exactly should be, and it should go no farther either way, as far as this gridlock that we find ourselves in. But, and we'll explain that in the next podcast, but when it comes to these rape standards, one, there was the trying to get forced envelopment onto the ticket, which was shot down by a feminist who said men cannot be raped, even, they probably wanted it anyway. And
can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, off the top of my head, there was sorry guys, I can't remember what year this was or whatnot, but I know there was a group trying to get forced envelopment. So as you say, like penetration, forced envelopment, so a woman getting on top of a man and forcing her dick.
That happened to me.
Right, no,
we talked about this in previous podcast, and I did myself.
Yeah, so they tried to put that on
the
rape thing, like the rape standards and practices.
Rape
survivors. And it was shot down by feminists, who what they said was men cannot be raped by a woman because a woman would never rape a man. Basically, was their argument, or physically cannot because. Hey, he's hard. He wanted it. Oh, she's wet. She wanted it.
Yeah. So thank you for get the fuck out of my head.
There's one other point that I was going to make that I forgot. On the fringe, there are, like you said, people who are gender studies, women's studies, people who are saying 72 hours to decide if it was rape. But I've also heard crazy shit on the fringe. Like denying woman sex when she wants it is rape. Now, it's on the fringe, but here's the problem. Even if it's only on college campuses, and even if it's, and that seems to be largely where it is, we're educating a bunch of young women who believe these are facts. So when they get out of college and start entering the workforce, my only hope is they've all taken women's studies and are qualified for nothing. Like, that's about as good as you can hope for, because we are raising.
No, you did make a good point, because I was going to say that's some real fringe thinking. I've seen that too. It's like rape by denial.
But how often has fringe became mainstream? Very often.
True, and you gotta kind of police against it. But we're definitely not trying to represent that as any kind of normative standard of rape.
Certainly not now.
No, but just keep
10,
an eye out
15 years. Keep an eye out. I'm sure that it will get more regressive as we go on.
Well, you can hope it'll go the other direction, but
yeah. You want to talk about paying for fucking?
Yeah, coming up on our next podcast post, we're going to be talking about hookers.
Yeah, we're going to be in Las Vegas, and we'll probably be fresh out of the Bunny Ranch.
Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Bullshit Buddies.
How much do you think it costs?